So we're back with this breaking news. Republican Congressman Adam Kinzinger is the newest member of the January 6th Select Committee. Speaker Nancy Pelosi saying today, quote, he brings great patriotism to the committee's mission to find the facts and protect our democracy. The committee's chair, Congressman Benny Thompson, praising the move on MSNBC earlier.
The congressman is a welcome addition to the committee. He's demonstrated that he can express his opinion despite what some of his Republican colleagues might want him not to express. So independent voice to this select committee is always welcome.
And joining me now is Illinois Congressman Mike Quigley, a Democratic member of the House Appropriations and Intelligence Committees. Always good to see you, my friend. Let's get into this. What's your reaction to Adam Kinzinger being added to this committee? And do you want to see more Republicans appointed?
I think it's a great pick. I want to see more Republicans appointed, which as you know, it's a small pool that could qualify. Only, as Ms. Cheney said, only 35 voted for an independent commission. And so many have respoken the big lie and voted against measures that would change this, like a defense supplemental. So I'd like to see more Republicans, but I think it takes more Republicans willing to choose country over party and truth over power. And sadly, there's just not that big a group. I did talk to Mr. Kinzinger briefly this week about this, expressing my hope that if it was offered, he would take it. And honestly, I don't think he needed any encouragement. And I'm very happy for him. Another voice from Illinois.
Yeah. Do you think that's this group of 9, that's what you're going to stick with, or do you think there will be others? Because apparently there are those who have raised their hand being of interest, whether they are all of that group of 35 or not.
I think I don't know what's happening behind the scenes and who's raising their hand. Frankly, on the Republican side, the more the merrier. I do think they will have had to shown some willingness to take this seriously in their votes and what they've said publicly. But look, as Democrats, we have asked Republicans to speak truth to power for about 5 years now that the Trump campaign and presidency took place in its aftermath. Those who do speak truth to power ought to be acknowledged and, in fact, rewarded with efforts like this.
Yeah. In fact, 2 of those who, in the opinion of Speaker Nancy Pelosi, don't speak truth to power would be Jim Jordan and Jim Banks, both of whom she refuted as being able to join this select committee. Take a listen to how she defended all that.
Speaker Pelosi didn't just ban me and Jim Jordan from serving on this committee. She also banned the very basic questions that we're asking. Why was the Capitol vulnerable on that day when 3 weeks before January 6th, there were intelligence reports that the leadership of the Capitol Police were aware of? Nancy Pelosi doesn't want me on that committee, but she doesn't also doesn't want us to ask those questions because it leads to a series of answers that don't fit her narrative.
And clearly that was not Nancy Pelosi defending her decision. That was Jim Banks saying what he thought of it. That said, how do you feel about his response there? Do you think his appointment would have jeopardized the integrity of the investigation?
Don't ask me, ask him in his previous remarks. You know, he tipped off that he was going to sabotage this. And I saw firsthand as a member of the Intelligence Committee and part of the first impeachment investigation, the Russia investigation, Mr. Jordan sabotaged those investigations, and he would have been a fact witness. So Mr. Banks can't have it both ways. You know, he can't attack this commission, vote against its existence, and then ask the very questions that an independent commission would have answered. He's speaking out of both sides of his mouth. It doesn't hold any water. And we should all be grateful he's nowhere near what this committee is going to try to do.
We have Kevin McCarthy, who has just put out a new statement in this last hour. And here's what it says. In part, Speaker Pelosi's rejection of the Republican nominees to serve on the committee and self-appointment of members who share her preconceived narrative will not yield a serious investigation. So what do you think about that? And more importantly, how do you think Americans are perceiving this message? Do you think Americans will say, look, we have Republicans, we have Democrats, there's a level of integrity in this committee's work?
I think an independent commission would have made it easier to convince Americans. But all I can ask is look at people's words. You know, democracy isn't a spectator sport. You've got to pay attention to what's happening now because so much is at stake. Democrats weren't attacked on January 6th. Our democracy was. I happened to be in one of the rooms where it happened, but I was there with Republicans and I was there with people visiting the Capitol. This is too important to allow anyone to play games with. So an independent commission would have done that. And Leader McCarthy, I would say, I'm just going to take you at your word for what you said when this happened, when you and Mr. McConnell laid most of the responsibility on President Trump for this. And how you changed your tune when it was politically expedient to do so.
I have one question about gun violence. I'm going to get to it, but I don't believe that you and I have spoken, or we have spoken since, but you haven't told me that you were on 1/6 hanging out, being sequestered, presumably, with a bunch of Republicans and people that were visiting the Capitol. What was the reaction of those Republicans and those Capitol visitors?
Well, first, I was I had been moved up into the gallery on January 6th when this was taking place, and I was there with Democrats and Republicans. They were saying, are these tourists? I don't think they were denying that it took place. They were trying to figure out how to keep their families calm and how to keep their own selves safe. And then when we were waiting to go back and we were, hidden away someplace, I think the same reaction was there. And as bizarre as this is, many of the folks who were sequestering, waiting to go back to vote, weren't wearing their mask on the Republican side. So it's just working against the reality of the world right now isn't keeping anyone safe.
But just last question, with the Republicans there with whom you were, waiting to get back to a sense of normalcy, was anybody considering this to be just a regular tourist day? Were any of those Republicans saying, this is no big deal, I don't know why we're being kept away from the chamber? I mean, were they afraid? I
think they might have been dissuaded of that when they heard the tear gas canisters breaking, the gunshots that was to my left, where a Capitol police officer had to take the life of someone. This was at the time, and they understood it. So, amnesia comes when, again, it's politically expedient, and it's not keeping any of us safe. And it's a direct assault after the fact on our democracy.
Yeah. I do want to get to gun violence and, in fact, the Justice Department's plan to tackle it here in this country. Attorney General Merrick Garland met with agencies in Chicago about launching gun trafficking strike forces in 5 cities. Those cities are Chicago, New York, Los Angeles, San Francisco, and D.C. Take a listen to some of the insight he gave.
I'm not here from Washington to tell you what to do. I'm here from Washington to find out what we can do to help you. And cooperation among all these agencies that I'm seeing around me are the key for this to work.
What do you think of that approach? Are you confident this strike force is going to be different from earlier federal efforts to curb gun violence in Chicago? And will this be more effective?
Well, look, I live in that same gun-weary city that he's talking about and he's from. Trying to do the same thing to address this problem over and over again is just, paraphrase, as insane as any other effort. I welcome this. I think we need a task force working at the federal, state, and local level to go after this network of guns streaming into our city, making this violence all too easy. I only want to couple it with the other things that I know the senators from Illinois were talking about, addressing this for the first time wholeheartedly as a public health issue. Going at it at the grassroots level to address it that way. But as you say, addressing it in the same old fashion as we have for years isn't going to change anything.
I want to take a look at some new polls out today, and they reflect the president's approval numbers. They are underwater when it comes to his handling of crime and gun violence. 39% of Americans approve of his handling of crime. 37% approve of his handling of gun violence. What is the issue here? And is this DOJ initiative, you think this is what fixes the confidence in the president on this, or does more have to be done?
Well, I think it's involved with the complexity of the issue of gun violence anyway, and the fact that this has been with us for so long. The solutions are complex, and addressing it to, I don't think the president cares about fixing his approval ratings. I think he'd rather just solve the problem, and where the approval ratings go, that's fine. And I think what he's done here is take an important first step. And we also have to address this in the House and Senate and pass, for the first time, full gun legislation that helps stem the violence at the same time.
Okay. Illinois Congressman Mike Quigley, it's always good to see you. Come back and see me anytime. Open invite to you, my friend. Thank you. So you probably